I mean, you've got small cats.
Hi, well, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ben Bederson, who's at the University of Maryland as an associate professor and director of the Human-Computer Interaction Laboratory. And he was at, I guess you got your PhD at NYU, is that right? Mm-hmm. And then was at Belcor and UNM before going to Maryland in 1998. So he's been there for a while. And they do all kinds of great user interface stuff. And since we are also in the business of user interfaces, albeit much less creative ones because they were designed for us by nature, we thought it would be interesting to get together and think about what user design looks like from the point of view of somebody who does it for a living, and whether speech and language and vision might play any kind of role in hybrid interfaces. There's a system, there are a couple of systems that Ben and his lab have built that I think might be particular interest here. One thing is that they've looked at voting systems and the usability of voting systems that are on the market. And, of course, there are a lot of people who work on voting. But with respect to CLSP, there is a system called PaperLens that won first prize at InfoVis recently, which is a system for browsing document collections efficiently. And seeing the relations among who's cited what and how many publications there were on a particular topic in a particular year and so forth. So that's another point of connection. And I'm going to shut up and let it go.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jason. Well, PaperLens you'll see its successor here today, so that's hopefully will be relevant. So I have to admit, when I first got this email from Jason, my first response was, I think you emailed the wrong guy. I don't do anything with speech. He said, no, you're really who we want to have, well, who we wanted to invite here. So we talked a little bit, and hopefully this will be motivating. As you kind of, I think, getting the picture, my work has really been on visual interfaces, taking advantage of human visual perception and seeing if we can help people. What I think of as my informal definition of visualization is to help people make sense of more information than fits on the screen. Of course, we do that by putting stuff on the screen, so that's a complete false definition. But as you would traditionally think of it as fitting on the screen, for example, with lots of text or numbers or stuff like that. So, a slightly more formal definition, well, not even a definition, but a description of what visualization is for, is to help you find patterns, outliers, and trends. There are lots of wonderful techniques for letting you search really good information spaces. Google is one of them. There's many others. But what happens when you don't know exactly what it is that you're looking for? If there's sometimes it's being called exploratory search. But in general, if you have a data set and you don't know exactly what question to ask of it, then visualization is often a good starting point to help you understand what is in that data set so that you can develop an intuition so that you can then use more traditional mechanisms to do queries and find out what you're looking for. So why visualization rather than, say, oralization or some other kind? And the answer is because humans have this nice couple pounds of meat in the back of their head specially designed for doing visual processing very, very efficiently in certain kinds of ways, and doing so pre-consciously, without you even being aware of it. And so I like this really simple example to make this point. I'm going to show you a sequence of numbers, and you tell me how many 3s there are. You ready? Okay. All right, you fail. All right, let's change the representation just slightly, and try again. Ready? How many 3s are there? And where are they? They're on the top left portion of this sequence, right? So this is clearly textual information, but with a little bit of extra visual information, it totally changes our perception and our ability to analyze it. And so clearly, there's something going on here that if we can take advantage of, we have the potential for improving how we can make sense of information. I approach visualization cautiously because there have been many, many examples of visualization that are compelling, and the New York Times has word inventive, imaginative, ingenious, and fanciful.
What did you say? New York Times?
New York Times had this quote about this visual interface.
you have seen.
Where would I have seen?
Around the conference table in Barton 320. Go on.
This is sort of irrelevant. There happens to be some visual graph browsing system by Plum Design called Visual Thesaurus. You guys, I'm sure, have seen it. It's sort of a browser of WordNet. And okay, it doesn't matter. Anyway, my question is it useful? They haven't shown that. I'm not completely convinced. There are lots of visualizations that people have built that are problematic.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Are you saying there is something concrete which is called Visual Thesaurus?
Yes.
And most of you guys have seen it? Is that the point?
It's an applet on, yes, it's an applet on the web, but I think if you go to visualthesaurus.com, you will see a kind of interactive animated graph browser of WordNet.
I see.
And so you can click on a word and say, it'll show you what the synonyms and what the antonyms are. You can click on one, it'll do some animation and see the related ones and so on. Yeah, it's inventive. It's fanciful.
And it's supposed to sort of, by distances, say which words are similar to others and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And does it do it?
I mean, it's just a browser on top of WordNet, what you're familiar with, right?
I am familiar with WordNet, yes.
So this is the question, does it help you see what the synonyms of a word are better than, say, a list of words, a list of the synonyms, right? Does this visual representation of WordNet help you to browse WordNet better than some other more textual, less visual way? And since you haven't seen, I don't want. My goal was not to analyze Visual Thesaurus, but to bring up the point that you can have visual representations that are interesting that may or may not help you actually solve a particular task. And what you really have to do is compare that visual representation against what the alternatives are. And what are the alternatives? Well, it depends on the domain. You know, there's lots of, depends what the state of the art is. You could imagine, I'm sure you all have seen various browsers of WordNet. I'm sure there must be many of them, of various kinds. So
What you are saying is unhelpful.
I'm saying this particular
Yes.
representation, in my personal expectation, is it's not that helpful. I have not seen any studies of it.
Same you're saying about PowerPoint.
All right, I see I've got a troublemaker here. I'm going to be much more specific. So,
I'm just crazy about PowerPoint. I like, what's his name, Knight, what's his first name? Kevin Knight, who does his slides by hand. And I think this is all too much technology, but he slipped up at the Gale kickoff. He had a PowerPoint presentation, and now there is no one I can admire.
well, fortunately, I had PowerPoint on the negative side of my list.
Yeah, all right.
So, let's see. The point that I'm trying to make is that visualization might be beneficial or it might not be, and you should be skeptical of it like any technology until proven otherwise. Some people do, and we try to do controlled studies to compare whatever we produce with what we think of as being the best alternative in a reasonable set of tasks with representative users and try and understand where the potential benefits are. In doing so, we've come up with our own sort of intuitive understanding about what makes visualizations work and not work. And these are some of the problems that often happen. One, there's inappropriate use of 3D. 3D for fundamentally, intrinsically three-dimensional data, like architecture or human bodies or mountainous ranges and things like that, make a lot of sense. But 3D for abstract data has not been shown to add anything. Most 3D representations compared to 2D representations of abstract data has not been shown to be particularly useful. It's a bit of an ongoing debate, but it's kind of died down. That was a big hot topic for many years and sort of disappeared. This is an example of a self-organizing map. The content is totally irrelevant. That happens to come from some web, trying to organize web pages. But the point is people have spent a long time trying to make two-dimensional maps or representations of data by clustering stuff and saying, oh, these topics belong together. Let's put them over here. and these topics belong together, let's put them over here. That should be useful to help people see that those topics are clustered. And it seems like it might be, except this is a problematic representation because there is no semantic meaning to these axes. Being further to the right doesn't mean anything. Being further up or down doesn't mean anything. And the impact of that on a user is that in order to perceive what is in this map, you more or less have to scan the entire two-dimensional thing. And since it's unstructured, it's very hard to scan. Right? People can scan grids reasonably well, but it's very hard to scan this. Because I kind of have to look at this area, and then I can come back, and then I have to remember, did I look at this or not, and so on. So this kind of map is problematic and has not been shown to be useful. There's lots of animations that have not been shown to be useful. Some animations have been, and I'm a strong proponent of certain kinds of animations. And the kinds of animations generally, I'm kind of jumping ahead here, I'm spending too much time on this, but animations can be helpful if they help you maintain object constancy. If there's a change in in your data, and the animation can help you understand what that change was, that one thing turned into another and it's the same object. That's roughly where it can be helpful. So this is just to say you should be skeptical of everything I say. So how do we avoid those things? Well, we just take the opposite of whatever I said. We try to have meaningful spatial axes. We try to have dense information designed to let you see a lot on the screen at once. At the same time, you can't show everything. And so we'd often start with abstractions or overviews and let you drill down to details. We build on my colleague Ben Schneiderman's seeking mantra, which is overview first, zoom and filter, and details on demand. But we've also started working bottom up and say sometimes you need to start with some specific piece of information you know and grow from there. And so we've started calling it plant a seed and watch it grow. But somehow, through all of this, we come up with various solutions to particular domains. And what I'm really going to do today is to show you 5 completely different systems that we've built to look at 5 different kinds of data, just to give sort of a broad brush stroke at some of the approaches that we've taken and where they work and where they don't. And we can spend more or less time on any of these things as you'd like. So PhotoMesa is a solution to a personal problem I had. Started when I had my first daughter about 6 years ago, and like many new parents, started taking lots of photographs, and quickly found that I was frustrated by the software to manage those photos. And so I said, well, I've been doing visualization for a long time. I think I can do better. Let's see if we can apply some of those techniques. And so what we came up with was PhotoMesa, and I'll just switch to it. The essential motivation is that most personal digital photo users don't spend much time organizing their photos. You could say that they don't spend much time annotating their photos. Sometimes they do zero annotation and just rely on the date that the photos were taken. Sometimes, more likely, what most people actually do is to drop photos into folders and give the folders names, which is some kind of minimal aggregation. Maybe they'll give the folders names by month, or maybe by event, if there's a big event and they took a lot of pictures on a particular time. So I said, can we build a tool that would support that kind of minimal annotation? And so over here, what we've got is just a folder browser, and I can select any photos. You're going to get a little personal history of my life at home. And what you can see here is my photos, my personal photos from 2005. There's 836 photos from 53 groups. And so the first thing you can see is these 2 photos are too small to see anything. Okay, but they're all there on the screen. So this is the overview first. It automatically partitioned the space into these rectangles, where each rectangle is just large enough to hold a set of photos associated with that group. And each of these groups that correspond to these rectangles come from some metadata. The default metadata is the folders. So this happens to be my folder system, because you can see I was photo user type 1. I'm naming my folders manually until I bought a new camera on May 4th, April 23rd, that automatically created folders with the date that the picture was taken. So now that does it for me. Now I do 0 annotation. And the interaction is mouse over for an instantaneous preview. Okay, here's the daughter that started all of these, this photo tool. And the interaction is, as you can see, mouse over to get a preview and click to zoom in and right click to zoom out. And so the hope was that with some kind of minimal interaction but quick navigation, sometimes it takes multiple steps to zoom in, you could move through quite a lot of photos all at once. And so this may not seem like a lot, but browsing 836 photos at one time is actually a fair amount. This is close to a gigabyte of data. So the fact that you got a chance of doing this just by visual browse is interesting. So then the question is, what happens if you do have a little bit of metadata? So there's an annotation tool here, so you can say who's in the photo or add tags to photos. And then you can do things like take the photos and show me which people are in them. So this uses the same kind of layout algorithm to take the space, partition it into new rectangles based on whatever groups are available. In this case, it's people. So Dana has lots of photos, and so she gets a big group.
Some photos may show up in multiple groups.
In this case, they will. Before they wouldn't.
This is not done automatically. You have to annotate it by the word name.
That's right. So right. So so let's see. So I'll show you one last little trick here. There's still a scale issue, and then I'll answer your question. One thing we can do is say, let me just put on representative photos. So instead of showing all the photos from each group, what I'll do is just show the representative photos that have been calculated some way, where some way might be random, or in this particular case, if you've annotated some photos as being favorites, then we'll pick those favorites and make those the representative photos. And then you navigate by, again, zooming in, and when you zoom in, you see that photo in context. Okay? So this is really just to give you a sense of what browsing lots of stuff might look like. In answer to your question about annotation, I guess there's two answers. The first is that this industry expectation is that less than 1% of people annotate their photos by hand. And therefore, we shouldn't... What?
At all?
At all.
So...
Oh, no, not by folder. Putting folders beyond folder name. So therefore, the industry says we shouldn't build good interfaces to support annotation because nobody would use it. So my perspective is slightly different. It's that nobody annotates photos because the interfaces are so bad. And if you built good interfaces that made it rapid and enjoyable and fruitful, then you would probably raise that to, I don't know, some number greater than 1%. So we built just some decent interface to annotate. You could do multiple selection and then do bulk annotation with a single thing. And then, of course, you can take good advantage of having those annotations. But another project was to try and build on some computer vision and to do face recognition to do the annotation for you. The problem, of course, is that face recognition is no good. And so this brought up a research topic of what I think of as semi-autonomous annotation, or how do you combine what's always going to be buggy annotation with human correction, and what does that look like? So we tried to use off-the-shelf face recognition, or really face clustering software, to find clusters of faces, put them together, with the goal being, in an interface kind of like this, with the goal being that users would just correct the mistaken identities, and then once you've made the clusters correct, just annotate the whole group with a single annotation. But we couldn't even get good enough face clustering software on real random, personal photos. So we did a little trick and did clothing recognition. So we found face location and then looked at the color of the clothing, a little rectangle underneath the face. And we got reasonably good results there. So we kind of experimented with that. It's an interesting direction. I think that is the right approach to go for personal photo annotation. That's one answer. And the other answer is collaborative sort of web kind of annotation among people that care. And that works great for non-family photos. But for family photos, when there's only 2 or 3 people that really care, collaborative annotation still is not going to scale up well. So I think semi-autonomous annotation is the way to go.
By which you mean what we would call active learning? Is that a term that you...
I don't know. I tell you to define active learning.
So the system says, here are some examples, and it would be nice if you annotated them.
It's, yes, and kind of incremental, because there might be new photos, and you have to do a little bit of going back and forth. So yes. Okay. So that's PhotoMesa. All right. So I'm going to switch gears to more structured kind of data. So we started off by looking at hierarchies. Well, actually, so you can see by the photos, a lot of what we do is we sort of pick a data type or data structure and then see how can we represent that data structure to users. So a very important data type is hierarchies. They're everywhere. We all use variations of Windows or Mac file system explorers to look at our hierarchies. And the field hasn't gone that much past that. And so we've tried to see if we could do a little bit better by, again, supporting an overview of large hierarchies to enable you to browse, understand structure so that you could then get down to details. So I'm going to switch to this tool called Space Tree. So this is a Java Space Tree.
Space Tree.
Space Tree. So I think I'll just start by showing it to you a little bit how it works, and then we'll see what's going on here. So this I've loaded in the animal taxonomy of 150,000 animals, and as I click, you'll see what's going on. Okay. Single click opens up that node and opens that child and closes anything else that was previously open by default. And that makes it so it's very easy to look around. Okay? There's all kinds of special little details that are going on. So when I clicked on this one, it didn't just open up its children, it opened up actually grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And that was dynamically determined that many nodes could fit on the screen at the current magnification, and so it did. It figured if you were interested in this, you might be interested in more, so why not open more? It was perceivable. You can see that there are these different representations of the part of the tree that's hidden. So this is a basic issue. If this is going to be an overview, it's not good enough to just show the parent and the children. You have no sense then of where the rest of the data is. So if I go back to the root, what you'll see is that if the subtree is small, and we can actually fit a graphical representation of the subtree right in place, then we do. Okay? Like this one's over here. Okay? If, however, and like this one, if the subtree is too large to actually show a graphical representation of the subtree, then we code the entire subtree with a triangle where the color, width, and height of the triangle codes, respectively, the total number of descendants, the average width of the subtree at each level, and the total depth of the subtree. And that's all in log scale. So that this one, for example, we have a tooltip that says the number of descendants. That has about 1,000 descendants, and this one has 66,000 descendants. Okay? We started by doing a task analysis and try to think all of the things that people actually do with trees when they have a hierarchy and want to look at it. And what we found is that most of the tasks are related to actually learning something about specific nodes. In other words, it was crucial to be able to support reading of the labels of the nodes. And that's interesting because if you look at most other visualizations of trees that are out there, they don't actually support reading of labels. Because in the goal of trying to support overviews, they try and put so many nodes on the screen at once that either they don't show labels at all or there's a huge amount of overlap and you can't actually read them. So instead we focus on a solution that lets you really focus on reading. So to do that, you can see that when you click on a node, it'll lay out its children in multiple columns so that they fit, so that you can read more children at once. But that's a trade-off because another task that we found is important is to be able to see where you are in the hierarchy, what level. And if you have multiple columns, then it's harder to have a clear sense that we're at the third level. And so instead what we do is only the currently selected set of children are laid out in multiple columns, and then then all others are in single columns. So when I click on insects, and we get to see this set of children in multiple columns, the current set will get pushed into a single column. Okay? This is all in a zoomable environment, so if we want to, we can zoom out and see an overview, but turned out to be not to be that useful. And the layout will depend on the current magnification. So that was there. If I zoom out and open and close earwigs, or open earwigs, we get more stuff because it will open up just as much as will fit. You can have incremental search. So if I say type in an animal like squid, then as I type in, it'll highlight where all of the nodes and subtrees that have the word squid. We could then use that to go explore where the selections are, but that's kind of annoying. If you've just typed in squid, you really wanted to see it. So we let you search for squid and see those nodes in context by showing all of their ancestors to the root. And by doing it this way, this lets us combine browsing and search in a nice way, because we just did a search for squid. But a lot of times the definition of some data is not explicit, but it's implicit in what the data is. So maybe if I want to see what giant flashing squid really is about, the best way to do that is by, that's not a good example. There aren't any other ones. Here, this is a better example. If I want to see what Caribbean reef squid is, I can open up its parent to see what its siblings are, and maybe that'll tell me something more about that group.
Now, is it confusing that when you have this view, you can't tell when there are other children or aren't children?
Yeah, I think that's a design bug. I think we should have some visual indication that stuff is... There should always, when you're hiding stuff, I think you should always let the user know that you're hiding stuff. So, yes. All right, so that's Space Tree. We did a study comparing it to two other things, to Windows Explorer and to Star Tree, which is a tool from Insight, which is a spin-off from Xerox PARC, if any of you happen to have seen it. It's kind of a hyperbolic, circular layout tree. And what we found was typical. And that is that each of the three visualizations were better than the others at some things. It's very hard to build any single interface, a general purpose interface, that's going to be better for all tasks in all domains. That's the bottom line. So, for example, Windows Explorer was really good for comparing two different nodes. Because what you can do in Windows Explorer is go down someplace, open up something, leave that open, and go someplace else and open up something else, and then compare them just by scrolling up and down. It's a little bit overwhelming because you can have a huge number of nodes opened at once, but the way that people actually use it, if you've opened up two things and you want to compare them, people can actually do that very, very effectively. In this case, we added special support for that by saying you can hold something open by right-clicking and saying bookmark, and now that'll stay open, so when I go someplace else, we can go compare here. But now, how do I compare this to that other one? Well, I could pan, but panning is slow, right? I could zoom, but now I can't read. And we could have added scroll bars, but that wouldn't work if you wanted to compare things at different levels. So the bottom line is it worked okay, and you could imagine variations that would improve the support for that particular task. But that was an interesting example of something where Windows Explorer beat this. Yeah?
Are there reasons not to split a window?
Yes. And I'll tell you why. There is a whole sequence of papers over about 10 years that showed the value of overview windows, which is a kind of split. In overview windows, you have some kind of visual representation of data, and you've got an overview, which is kind of like a zoomed out map, and then a detailed view. And the idea is, as you navigate within your detailed view, your overview has some kind of little box showing you where in the field your detail is. Okay? There's lots of variations of it, but this is one very common thing, and it's typically used for images. And it's generally a good thing. And when you talk to users about it, they love their overviews. They use them regularly, and they claim that it helps them. So we had this intuition that that overview window was problematic because it takes up screen space, which means there's less space available for your detail view, which is what you really care about. You can't actually navigate with your overview window very well because it's so zoomed out, you've got very low resolution. And in addition, you have to change your focus between two different representations and merge those, two different representations in your head. So there's obvious potential benefit, but there are these potential concerns. So we did a study looking at map navigation with and without an overview, where it was a nice, smooth, animated, zooming map, and we had State of Washington and some other places, and asked typical map questions. Follow this river and say how many cities you pass, or how far apart are these two things, all kinds of different map navigation tasks. And what we found is that the overview was preferred by, I think, every single user but one. And we had two different conditions of maps, two different kinds of maps. One kind of map had a multi-scale representation, so that when you were zoomed out, you could still see some meaningful information about the small stuff. And the other was, all the text was the same size. So when you were zoomed out, you couldn't read any text at all. When you really should be able to still see the county names, for example. They should be a larger font. Okay? So what we found is for a multi-scale representation, which means any decent visual representation of a big data set, all of the map tasks were slowed down when you used an overview by about 20%. Really surprising. Surprising, it was inconsistent with the previous literature, but if you think about what was really going on, it made sense. And by looking at our data, that was consistent with what we found. So,
well, I think Brock's question was for the particular task of comparing two things that Windows Explorer is good at. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to pull down divider bars so you have two panes?
I interpreted your question in a way that would let me answer it with something interesting that we've done, but nothing at all with what you're asking. I could make a good politician. Is that right? Is his interpretation the right interpretation of your question?
But the thing about the overview map is interesting.
Okay. Sorry. If you really want to compare two things, why not just have two windows? The answer is it's going to be a trade-off, because it's not really fair to study a single task in isolation. For any given task, I can give you an interface that solves that task perfectly, right? By just presenting the answer. What you really want to do is come up with a configurable generic interface that will support many, many different tasks to let you do what you want to do. So if a real-life task is that sometimes you want two windows and sometimes you don't, then you need an interface that lets you create that second window and configure it so that the two views are looking at the same two things that you want. And so is the configuration of those two views overall faster than scrolling back and forth between two things? And the answer is, it depends, right? If the task is simple enough so that you can keep the two things in your head and your memory at once, which for many times the answer is no, but sometimes the answer is yes, then scrolling is probably better. But for tasks when you have to use your short-term memory, or your short-term memory is taxed, then it's probably worth the overhead of setting up multiple views. And there have been studies that have, in various contexts, have shown basically that I guess the short version of this, humans have terrible short-term memory. So any interface that requires you to use your short-term memory to perform a task is going to be problematic. And so if you have to use short-term memory, then use multiple views instead. Okay. Space tree is done. So once we had done this, the natural next question is, well, if we can do trees, can we do graphs? So we looked at what was out there, and we saw lots and lots of stuff like this. I call this the rat's nest solution. It looked like a rat's nest to me. I have no idea what a rat's nest actually looks like, but sort of seems like a rat's nest to me. So the problem with this approach is that it doesn't support reading very well. You can't actually see the details of nodes.
What are these cities or what are they? What are the entities that we should read? I mean,
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I don't.
But it doesn't matter. The point is that there are a lot of graph layouts solutions that look something like this. Some of them look a little bit better, admittedly. But they're basically, there's graphs. There's nodes and edges that connect them with attributes. And how do you help people see those? Most people assume that you want to get an overview and see all the stuff at once. And that fits our standard visualization notion of overview first, zoom and filter, detailed on demand. The problem, an overview of this will show you structure of the graph, but almost by definition, it can't show you attributes that you can read. It can show you, sometimes it can show you quantitative attributes with size, but rarely textual attributes. So there's certainly some value in this, and if your task is to see what are the major connected components and what are the key nodes that are shared among connected components, that might be good. But if your task is to find me all of the neighbors of a node, or find me all of the nodes that two nodes have in common, this kind of representation doesn't typically work very well.
Although if you make it interactive, it might work a little better. So if you
with the right kind of highlighting,
the neighbors of the node or selecting two nodes might show you all the nodes that have in common or whatever.
That will work better, but it's still problematic because those nodes are going to be all over the place, and it's very hard, because of the reasons we discussed earlier, to scan a two-dimensional, unstructured representation to see them. So if you've got 30 nodes all over the place, and I ask you to read those 30 nodes, you probably can't do it. Again, you could imagine...
You could imagine supporting these particular tasks.
Yes.
You click on these two things and you get a textual list.
Sure. Yes.
Like
So I don't want to say this is hopeless, and I think a good interactive graph approach is certainly worth pursuing. And I think you're about as close to pursuing it as anyone has done.
Well, I don't like graphs nets either. So
yeah, but people generally haven't yet done a good job at this. Let me put it that way. So we decided to do something slightly strange, which was to build on what we learned from Space Tree, which is that it's computationally easy to represent trees, and humans are really good at perceiving trees. So we had the strange idea, which is that we could take any graph and represent it as a tree plus crosslinks. Right? Take any node, call it a root, lift up this graph and shake it out, and effectively do a breadth first search, order them by some reasonable ordering, depending on your content domain, lay it out as a tree, and then somehow interactively show crosslinks. And so when we did that, we came up with this new tool that we call Tree Plus. It's slightly more than trees. It's trees plus crosslinks. All right? And our sort of guiding metaphor is plant a seed and watch it grow. Start with a node, call it the root, and go from there. Its potential advantage is that it's going to be perceivable. You're going to be easily going to be able to read lists of siblings and related nodes and things like that. And it's got a major obvious downside, which is going to mislead users to make them think that there's something hierarchical about this data structure when it's not at all. So
I don't see the crosslinks there.
That's right. I haven't shown the crosslinks. So we're going to show crosslinks with interaction.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to show Tree Plus with some data.
So what are we looking at?
So this is a data set which is a food web. It is animals, and it's the nodes are animals, and the edges are which animals eat other animals. Okay, we work with some biologists, and we have NSF funding to support visualizations for biodiversity. That's what's helping to support this. So Puerto Rican coqui frogs eat all of these things in blue, are eaten by these things in red, and both eat and are eaten by those things that are sort of pinkish that you can't see with this projector. This color is pretty, unfortunately, not too good. They've got bidirectional arrows. So, and we also do something that you suggested, which is there's a preview. So whenever you have a selected node, we always show all of its siblings in an explicit list on the side here. in addition
So
to
these
whatever.
are the siblings of Puerto Rican.
In this particular case, this list is exactly the same as these two columns. But we don't have enough room to show the whole list. So it gets clipped. That's a design bug. So let's open something. Frogs are eat mites. So when I click on mite, single click, it effectively gives me a preview of what mites are related to in the context of coqui frogs. And so what I get here is highlighted nodes. All the highlighted red things now are what, well in this case, what eat mites. It looks like mites don't eat anything. That's interesting.
Dust. But nothing, these are the only things that were already on the screen, right?
Well, these are all the animals.
Correct. This, what you see here is only the things that are on the screen. And over here, we see currently visible adjacent nodes as well as not currently visible nodes. And it still doesn't eat anything.
Yeah, okay.
So I have to go ask my biologist about this.
Well, I think these are all the animals, right?
No.
In this list.
No?
Let's click on something else, and I'm sure we'll find it.
Yeah.
The point is it eats plants.
Yeah, we've got flowers.
Oh, flowers.
There you go.
So here's a good example. So frogs eat these things. Earwigs are eaten by all of these things. And in addition, they eat live leaves, which is not on this list because frogs don't eat live leaves. Okay? So the first thing you see as you go along, right, you can click and get a preview. I like the earwig example. Okay? And then you can double click to say, okay, I'm interested in earwigs. Let's go expand that. And so this kind of slightly complicated animation happened, which I'm still not completely happy with. That move things around. And what it does, so now that I double click on earwigs, it's going to show me everything that earwigs looks at now is on this list. So these two lists are now identical. Okay? But there's a fundamental question, which is some of these things are also connected to frogs, to these coqui frogs. So what do we do with them? So we had to make a design decision. Either, and there's several different options. The first option would be to leave these nodes where they were and duplicate them. The second option is to leave them where they were and have some kind of line or visual representation from earwig to those nodes. And the third possibility is to take those nodes and take them out of that coqui frog and put them over here. And we went back and forth and we made a list of all of the trade-offs of the three different approaches. And like any one of these things, there's pluses and minuses to all of them. And it depends on your which particular tasks you want to support. We ended up using the third one. So we took things out and put them over here. And the fundamental reason was, let's see. We didn't do the line approach. Because once you open up to have a big graph, these lines can very quickly go off screen and you'll end up having lines that all overlap and are not helpful at all. So that was easy to give up. But the bigger question is, should we have duplicated or pull them over here? We didn't duplicate them because we were afraid that it would be confusing to users because when you see something, you wouldn't know let's see if I can say this. I think we just felt like we were fearful that the graph would become too big because there'd be too many nodes, and that it wouldn't be clear which nodes were represented multiple times in multiple places. And so we did this approach. In retrospect, I'm not sure that was the right decision, which is why I'm having a hard time justifying it. This does work, and it actually does helps. We're successful in simplifying, but it also complicates things sometimes. So one of the things I would like to do is to implement both versions and to compare and to study them, and we might do that. But the answer is I don't know which of those two works better because we've only implemented one. Anyway, I can go on. Earwigs eat live leaves, which don't eat anything but are eaten by these things. And so now we can do stuff like see what frogs and live leaves have in common. Right? Frogs eat these things which are eaten by live leaves. You can do stuff like reroute, so we can take a spider and make that the root. Okay? We can do stuff.
Move the spider, or did it jump there by itself?
Oh, it jumped there by itself to the center of the screen since I rerouted. I can show all outgoing nodes. So basically I'm doing I think, why didn't that do what I thought it would? Oh, that did. Okay. That was a really bad example.
Progress doesn't mean anything.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah, sorry, I should have read the label. So I did a depth first search on an exceedingly uninteresting animal. So let's go back to coqui frogs. Ah, that's kind of a bug. Wow, I wonder what I can do here. I can see incoming nodes. There we go. Fit in window. So there's kind of a way to get an overview is the bottom line. We can go to Hawks, make that the root, show all outgoing nodes, so that does a search and I can see an overview. So this says from a particular node, where can we get to? So this is Tree Plus, and we did a comparison to Rat's Nest. Okay, so we built our own thing using a touch graph layout, which is a commercial tool, but it's a standard. We implemented a standard kind of Spring layout algorithm with some optimizations to reduce label overlap. And the interactions are the same. So we didn't want to have the interaction be a confounding factor. So you can single click to see what's related to a particular item and double click to expand that node. Okay, and we color and so on the same way. And we compared these two with a bunch of tasks. And we compared it with two different graph densities. So that is nodes that were connected on average to either 15% of other nodes or to 30% of the other nodes to see if density had an impact. And what we found is that the Tree Plus tool worked better than the graph tool in both time and success for just about everything except for one task. So it's kind of interesting to see what that task was. And I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. It is to count the people with a given characteristic within two links. So that is, given a node, if you were to follow two links from there, how many of those could you get? How many had a certain characteristic? And the bottom line is that's a hard task. But I think with Tree Plus, they tended to lose their context, maybe because these nodes kept on moving around. And so when they clicked on something, they would have to remember what they had clicked on more than they had to with the graph. So I think they were able to use the layout of the graph to aid their memory a little bit. Something like that. This is ongoing. I don't think we're quite there. I don't think we have the holy grail of graph browsing, but I think it's sort of an intriguing approach to take a complex structure and represent that with a simple structure for users. And also I should say that user preference was overwhelmingly in favor of Tree Plus compared to Graph Plus. And I think only, again, one person preferred the Graph one. And also, we asked people explicitly what they thought about this misleading approach to making it look like a tree rather than a graph. And I think all of the users, reported that that wasn't a problem. That when they were in charge and they were driving this tool, they quickly understood what was going on and they were able to use it. And they liked having linear lists that they could read. So overall, I think it was a good idea, and it's getting close to being a good tool. And so now you see this. It feels quite a lot different than your hypergraph browsing tool. So I'm still scratching my head a little bit to try and think about.
Well, the branching is very different. I think is one of the big differences. It's in the examples that we looked at.
Right. So, anyways, I think it's worth spending a little bit more time thinking about. All right, I think we still have 10 minutes left. Is that right? Yeah. All right, so I've got time for one more. So there was the InfoVis conference had a contest last year where they gave a very specific data set and asked people to come up with a visualization, a specific data set and tasks, and tried to and asked people to come up with visualizations to help solve those tasks on that data set. So we submitted something well, so the data set was the history of papers published at the InfoVis contest over the last 10 years. And then the tasks were things related to understanding that data set. Who were well-cited authors? What was hot topics? What trends used to be hot and no longer are hot? All kinds of things about trying to make sense of this field. So you can see there's lots of representations that were very visual and sort of node link diagram approach. And then there was our solution, which is this one, which doesn't look anything like that. This is what it looked like. What we did was to say, again, you know what? The traditional visualization approaches are too complicated, so let's simplify at the risk of losing some information, but making it much easier to understand what is there. So what we did was we had an overview with a series of histograms, where each histogram shows all of the papers, number of papers by year, by topic. So there's the papers were clustered by topic through some textual clustering mechanism. This was done with Microsoft Research, and they actually did the clustering, so I don't even know how they did it. But using title, keywords, and abstract only. These then are the, you can't read these, but these are the labels of the topics, and you can then see trends. Like this is CSCW, Computer-Supported Collaborative Work, has been a topic of steadily growing interest. I should say also this screenshot is from a slightly different data set. This is from the CHI conference, and this is 20 years of data. So it's the same idea, but just a slightly more interesting data set, because the InfoVis data set was only a few hundred papers. This is 4,000 papers. So we did this after the contest, and this data set, and we liked it. This is an overview of top cited papers, a list of papers and authors, a list of authors, a connectedness thing, so you could see who co-authored a paper with somebody else, and so on. So we liked this idea. It was totally hard-coded for this data set, and we thought it was an interesting approach. And we said, can we generalize this? Is there anything else this is good for aside from papers? And what we realized is that papers, or in conferences, are a special instance of bipartite graphs, where with a bipartite graph is basically having two node types and edges, both self-edges so a node might have relationships to other nodes of the same type, and there might be a relationship between nodes. So if you think of papers as being a node type and people as being a node type, they both have attributes, and they have, well, papers have relationships to other papers, and people might have relationships to other people through, if you have other kinds of metadata, through advisor relationships or colleague relationships or so on. So we decided to write this, to rewrite this tool to support any kind of bipartite graph, having, instead of a specialized interface, completely generic interface for two nodes, two entity types.
Well,
So-
why only two, actually? Well, maybe I'll come back to this, but it's another way of describing a bipartite graph is a list of pairs. So what you have is a database of two columns. Now, once you start throwing in institutions and other metadata, then you have multiple relations, and maybe you have relations of multiple columns.
This is, I consider this to be slightly controversial in the same way that Tree Plus is slightly controversial. We specifically chose an easier, not complete problem with the hope of doing a really good job at it.
Sure.
And if we could do a really good job at it, then we could look at expanding it to either support other node types, or you can always turn a node into an attribute. So worst case, we can have lots of attributes with two node types. But ideally, you'll see this conceptually could be expanded to multiple node types. So let's look at what we've got here. The left half of the interface is papers, and the right half is authors. Okay, and by default, it shows a histogram of papers by year and authors.
Basically, how many papers were published?
Correct. This is a log scale. I can make it linear scale, but right now it's a log scale, so be warned, things are slightly not what they always appear. But really what you can do is you can show a histogram by any metadata that you have. It doesn't make sense to look at people by year. So we look at the metadata that we do have on people, which is what kind of institution they come from. So we have a number of people in government. I'm not even sure, I'm sorry, I don't know what INC means.
Automated information extract, so something ink in the author filing, right?
Yeah, so it's probably, yeah, right. So it's probably, so I was thinking, but I wasn't sure. It's probably basically government, I mean, it's some kind of corporate thing that wasn't specifically identified as a known research lab, probably. And this is log scale, so there's many more unknown than anything else. So that's interesting, but that's not that interesting.
It just says how many authors came from which.
This is right now. These are separate. This is just a total set of papers and total set of authors, unrelated at this point.
I know, but classed by where they come from.
Correct. But yes, by where they come from.
And why is this red thing?
Oh, when I mouse over, it just highlights the one I moused over and tells me the label. There's 112.
Years, 1992.
112 people from 1992. 112 papers from
Just
1992.
give you X and Y.
Yeah. So now what I can do is I can break up this histogram into multiple histograms by whatever other metadata I have. So since I have topic information, I can group by topic and give me one histogram by topic. So in other words, this is giving me the same information we had in paper lens, but now in a generic way. And I can see the exact same information. So CSCW has been expanding over time. Information visualization got popular around 1990 and has been more or less constant since then. All right. I don't really have too much.
Chi, right?
This is Chi, yes. So this is 4,000 papers and 20 years of Chi. I can look at the country that the papers come from. Well, actually, it's not the. It's really not. It's the country that the paper were published in. So what we're really seeing is where was Chi held, and we can see it's been held in the United States most years, but 1 year in Austria, 2 in Canada, and 2 in the Netherlands. I can, let's see, go back to topic. I suppose city. Oh, this is interesting. I haven't looked at that. So it's been held in Boston 3 times. All right, so they clearly shouldn't be having it in Boston again. Or maybe they should because people liked it. So I can look for a keyword like, I don't know, speech. I haven't done this. Let's see what we get. All right, good. So there has been some work in the Chi community about speech. We can see it's been more or less increasing in time. If we can see where country the speech work comes from, more or less all over. We can see how our classification system categorized the speech work. A lot of it's an anthropomorphism. Anyway, the point is, through this kind of representation, you can search and see how your search results fits within your overview. We get a list of papers. So this is new. I usually use a known search, but it's more fun to do something I don't know. We can see the number of citations of each of these papers, because suppose my task is find influential papers about speech in the Chi community. Right? I can look at this. Let's see what that is. Designing speech acts. Interesting. Speech patterns and video, voice notes. So let's take these top few. Say the top 6 that have more than 10 citations, hide everything else. I get a list here of all the papers that cited those papers. So now I can, here's my list of other things to go look at. But more interestingly, I can see the people associated with those papers. So now I can make a link from papers to people. So I said, of the currently selected papers, which are these top cited speech papers, I can see the people that authored those papers. And these are the people.
And what is this?
So this is
and they came from, 8 of them came from...
miscellaneous, 5 from research labs, 2 from universities. By country, well, who knows? It's hard, probably not too helpful. And we can look at this number of papers.
2? There is an enormous number of them.
No, just of these 6 papers.
Of those 6 papers.
2 were from... Oh, this is not 2 authors. This is 2 papers.
No. Of the 6 papers that we selected,
yeah,
there are a total of 16 authors.
Okay.
And of those 16 authors, 2 of them are from universities.
Right-hand side is authors, left-hand side is papers.
Right. So I can look over here, number of papers in the current list that these people wrote, 1 each. So there's no person that stands out as having written more, no person has written more than one top-sided paper. But maybe I want to focus on these two people, see who those are, and then go back to the other direction and see what papers those people wrote. Or maybe I want to start over and say, I don't know if this will show up. I'm not sure if, I'm not sure how to cite you guys. How would it show up in a paper? Would it show up as CLISP in a paper?
Well, it would be our particular names.
Right. Well, maybe it'll be easier just to say.
Say CLSP then?
Say what? Oh, J.
Or try Hopkins.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if it's going to show up under papers. Actually, this is something confusing. Okay. Well, anyway, we've got 3 people from Hopkins that have.
So one person from Hopkins.
Yeah. Interesting.
2 people named Hopkins.
All
Their
right.
name?
Right. Name Hopkins.
So somebody named Hopkins is from Hopkins?
No.
Wasn't there under last, wasn't there somebody called Hopkins?
It was Brenda Hopkins.
Yeah. There's 2 people whose last name was Hopkins, and I unselected them. All right. So let's do something slightly more general. Let's look at Maryland. I know there's more people in Maryland that have authored a Chi. Okay. And so then you could go through and see.
Well, maybe you have this Hopkins now. Oh, Maryland.
I just replaced Hopkins with Maryland.
But as a university, not Maryland as the.
Well, I
It's
typed
just a
in.
text search.
I just as a
Find it
text.
in any field.
I see.
Right.
That's how we got in trouble last time.
Yeah. And what we'll probably find is all kinds of different people from all over the place. So it doesn't really matter. I think that's enough of the details. The point is that through simple representations and browse and search and going back and forth, there's the potential for actually answering fairly complex questions that I would argue, and I think other people have agreed, you can't solve with any of the other visualizations. And it would be very hard to do this with a database tool without spending a fairly significant amount of time writing queries. And the goal that we haven't quite gotten to yet, right now we can only do these single, like we can search, select, and then shoot them over to the other side. And then filter and shoot them back to the other side and go back and forth. But what I'd really like to be able to do is make each of these representations be a full first-class object which can drive a query into any other part. So it's a little bit of a challenge. Like right now, you can get a paper list and get the list of cited papers, but you can't select from the list of cited papers and go from here to drive back to paper list. And so we're struggling with just a usability problem of how to represent exactly where your query is. We did it this way because that was a simple thing that had a reasonable chance of people perceiving, and even this is a little bit confusing. So this is a challenge. So basically what we've got here is a visual interface to a database, sequentially filtered database queries, as opposed to a traditional approach, which is either form fill in, or form fill in and you get a list of results and you say apply this query to the current search, right? So that's what our competitors are. And I think that this is on a good track to support a much richer set of queries, but it's still challenging. Where ACM is being friendly to us, they've given the metadata for their entire guide. So we have database now with 1 million items. So far we've only loaded these 4,000, we just got that. But the goal is to really try and scale this up. We're also working with Doug Ward and others to apply this to other domains. So we have the Enron email corpus from Berkeley and have this same tool running with emails and people. And then we're working with Westlaw to have court cases and people, and so on. But so the idea is, I don't know, I think that's clear. And I think I used up more than my time, so I'm sorry. But I think I said most of what I wanted to say. The one thing I'll say in closing that I didn't say is that I think every single one of these tools was built with the toolkit, that open source toolkit that we built and are giving away called Piccolo, available in Java and C# to support 2D structured animated graphics. Except for if you're building graphs, for which Prefuse is a good alternative, just about everything else, I think this is the right toolkit. I encourage you to take a look or come talk to me. And I think I started off with my conclusion, so I think I'll end. Thanks. Yeah.
One question regarding graph visualization. The examples that you showed, the links on the graph didn't have any notion of distance in them. And
You mean in our tools or the other tools?
no, in the example that you showed with the insects and who eats what.
In Tree Plus.
Uh-huh.
In Tree Plus.
If you eat a lot more mites than detritus, there's no way to show that not
Correct.
children
We're really not showing attributes right now.
Right.
That's the.
And then the other thing that
But,
was
so yes, I agree.
And the other thing which comes up in our work a lot is these points in the graph really live in some 1 or 2 or 3-dimensional space where even the absolute position of the node has meaning. So,
Can you give me an example?
okay, so one example is that these nodes could be the start and end points of word hypotheses in a search graph.
Mm-hmm.
And so now
So there are times.
So they're time points, and so all the nodes in the graph are actually ordered in time.
Right.
And
You're right. I think this approach does not support that at all by its very nature. I mean, I think so. I think Jason suggested very appropriately that we and others can and should do better work on interactive, more traditional graph layout. And so for that kind of thing, where it is fundamentally time-oriented graph information, then I think you probably do want a graph layout with, perhaps, I like this kind of interaction. I think that's actually works pretty well. But this is a particular kind of layout, and we haven't explored other kinds of layouts that this or other kinds of interaction might work with well.
And then one question in this context, even for this setting. So when you say this, let's say this sharp-shinned hawk is your root, and you draw a tree from it. So what you've essentially done is you're going really outward in the graph, so to speak. But everything outward is now to the right. And then when you picked one of them and said, show me more details about that, let's say one of these. So then the others, in some sense, should go to the left because they're 2 steps away now. In other words, the way I get from the warbler to the bullfinch is to go through the hawk. So did you experiment with those where you...
So I don't think I understood. Can you say that again?
Let me say. So there are mites and mayflies. Okay, earwigs and flowers.
Uh-huh.
Right, so they're right next to each other.
Right.
And so had I drawn something with earwigs as the root, I would have had the frog, and then that would have connected me to flower.
All right. Well, why couldn't I have? I could have taken this
Could
by.
have taken everything on the to
Right.
the
Our
right
setting
of
route totally started over. It would actually take me some work to get back to where we were.
Right.
I'm over here as mites. This gets me back to where we were, but I had to do that by my memory.
Right.
So you're saying, why don't we have a set as root option that takes my current context?
Yes, and sort of swings it over to the other side because there is, after all, something further away
Yes.
from the root.
That's not a bad idea. Yeah.
I have a more general question. I mean, do you expect that by the year, I don't know what, we're going to have standardization? I mean, I certainly would hate to learn your system. I don't mean anything.
I don't blame you. No, I don't blame you. I hate to learn my systems
I don't
too.
want to learn any new system. So if you feel that there is a chance, so I'm asking whether you feel that there is a chance that these things will be standardized and I will learn it, and then for the next 20 years I'll be able to use it. Or is there never
For the next few years, but with use it for all your applications and all your
for
database
all my
processes.
applications and everything, and also I would want the data to organize itself. In other words, I don't know really where you got this hierarchy from, but I suppose it was already organized and you only visualize it.
Correct.
But I would like something that I would throw at it and it would organize it.
So let me start by answering your question slightly different. Let me phrase your question the way I'd like you to, the way I'd phrase it, which is, are these tools for everybody, or are they highly specialized tools? Do they ever have a chance of becoming tools for everybody? Right? Where if they're tool, I mean, that's just, I'm slightly loosening your restriction. I don't think we have to have precisely only one variation of a graph browsing tool. You know, we have several different commercial photo browsing tools, and I think it's good to have a healthy, you know, competitive landscape of several different approaches, but not 50 different approaches, right? There needs to be some commonality.
Differently. I mean, I would like to have one comprehensive set of approaches, which I would learn, and I would never again look at anything else.
Yeah, I wouldn't like that. I think.
Well, that's because you are in this business. But I am not in this business. I'm only a user, and to me...
So, do you want Word or Emacs? Which one, your department, which one can we get rid of?
Well, right now, as far as I'm concerned, you can get rid of Emacs.
The point is...
No, I understand.
You see what
I understand that. Yeah.
So, I don't think you can say, I'm not going to say there's only going to be one. But can there be a small number of basic models that the world sort of, you know, latches on? I think that's a reasonable hope. I don't think we're anywhere close to that. I think it's clear this is very much experimental.
Right, exactly.
I mean, you can hear by my comments, I think we have some interesting ideas going down interesting paths. It's certainly not done. They're specialized. They're at the point where they're good for serious. They're good enough to be helpful to analysts. You know, it's people that are experts in their domain and really care about it, so they're willing to learn a tool. But they're not at the point where somebody can pick up and use them. So will we get there? I think I'm optimistic. I think the answer is yes. So, so there have been a small number, but non-zero number, of successful commercial visualizations. So maybe it would help a little bit to talk to you about what some of those are. One is a variation on tree maps. So a tree map is the general word for the kind of space partitioning layout that I showed in PhotoMesa. It takes a rectangle and partitions it into sub-rectangle based on attributes and can do that hierarchically. So my colleague Ben Schneiderman invented it over 10 years ago, almost 15 years ago, and thought they were great and pushed them and pushed them and pushed them, and maybe yours is where we are here with this. And never was able to get him out the door. Even though he was absolutely convinced they were totally appropriate for showing certain kinds of data really, really well.
And you agree?
And I agree. And I saw them, I said, this is a terrible idea. They're ugly, they require too much learning, all this kind of stuff. And then somebody clever came along and said, oh, I was going to show this my other project, but I think I won't right now. Can you see this? Yeah. This is, I have several lives, and visualization is one of them. So I was going to hint at some other lives, but I think we've used up, I'm not going to. So a company called smartmoney.com made something called Market Map, which you may have seen. And this is an overview of the stock market. It's a tree map, okay? And what it does is it shows the entire market hierarchically by sector. So this big area is financial, this big area is technology. The size of each rectangle is proportional to the market capitalization, how much money that company is worth. And the color shows how that stock traded today. If it's green, it went up. If it's red, it went down. If it's brighter green, it went up more. So this company is a medium-sized company that went up the most in technology, electronic arts. And this is a small company that did really badly, Red Hat. Okay. Oh, NCR did really well. Okay. And then you can also drill down. You can say click and say show me the sector map, and now I can see technology in more detail. So this is an idea. So Ben Steinman was pushing tree maps for a long time and got nowhere. And this was the first company that said, yes, this is complicated, but if we make it a single screen, delivered on the web, reasonably perceptible color and size representation, so with 20 seconds of training, people can understand it, and we give people data they really, really care about, then it will help people to solve a problem that no other overview of the stock market had done to date. And sure enough, this pushed this company to be successful, and there's now 3 or 4 other companies that are selling tree maps for similarly important kinds of things. And the Marines rely on an internally developed version of tree maps for their supply chain management, and actually gave Ben Schneiderman an award of merit for supporting, their logistics of the Marine Corps. So this is a particular example of something. Is it on everybody's desk for everything? No, it's not there yet. But it has taken root enough, so I think it's likely that this kind of representation will probably stick around in various forms. So is there going to be a jump for other ones, for node link diagrams? Possibly. I think it's not unreasonable. Windows Explorer is the first one. It is a node link diagram of hierarchies. And that's become standardized. Whether it's Mac or PC version, they're basically the same. There's another good success is a company called Spotfire, which also is a spin-off of Ben Schneiderman's work. None come up from my work yet, I'm afraid. And it is motivated by dynamic queries. So you kind of have an overview of data and sliders where you can change sliders that are queries on a database, and the overview dynamically changes to show the hits, and you can reconfigure it a lot in the way that NetLens does. And they've been very successful selling to pharmaceutical companies that are doing drug exploratory searches. You've got all of these attributes of very complex data spaces, and you have to browse and search and explore and see where things are and where things aren't, and so on. And so they've been successful within a niche, and these niches are slowly growing. So, I think for all of these cases, every single one that I've told you about, they are not for novice everyday use. They're still for sort of expert analysts. And that may be where visualization's strength lies, because the whole point of visualization is to make sense of complicated data, to build your intuition so that you can see outliers and patterns so that you can continue to do more queries. Who wants to do that except for a somewhat expert analyst? I think for the novice user, I think that the Google approach is much more likely to be the continued standard, which is I type in one word and I get a list of what I probably want. For me, that's the equivalent of the do right thing machine. Right? I want a machine with one button, and whenever I press it, it does exactly what I want it to do. And that's what most users want. So if your question is, are you going to develop interfaces that support me for everything I want? And the answer is probably not with these tools. So that's a long answer, but that's a good question, because it's where's the direction of visualization?
You said in the graph browser you're working with biologists. Do you have specific tasks that they perform in that kind of local search that where just looking at a node and its neighbors is able to, or maybe
right.
2 nodes away, is able to tell them something new, or are they really looking at higher order relationships?
We have so we came up with a whole bunch of, we have a specific task list that is definitely directly motivated by the biologist tasks. And I don't have that list in front of me, and I can't tell you precisely what they are, but certainly answering these kinds of specific questions was interesting to them. But are we at the point where they are truly using this as their research tool to support their hypotheses? The answer is no. And a lot of that has been data. It's, so I'll tell you, I would say we've not been completely successful with our use with the biologists. We have run into a continuing challenge, and the challenge is to get enough data that's meaningful from a biologist into a format that we can handle requires a significant amount of work that neither us nor them want to do. And they are doing their work already, and if we're not completely satisfied, are feeling like they've been doing their work and they're satisfied enough so that they don't necessarily want to be partners in our user interface research.
It's not to say, what do you want, and then they'll just tell you, because they can't.
So we have not yet been successful in making this particular tool work for our biologists for these sort of organizational reasons. we have had many other cases where we have worked with partners where our tools have been very successful. So I guess, so space tree is much more, well, so this is new. Space tree has been used quite a lot because lots and lots of people have data in hierarchical formats that are easy to convert into other hierarchical formats. And we just read an XML file. So anybody that has an XML hierarchy can load it into space tree. So lots of people download it and play with it and have found that useful. So this is actually a good lesson here. And I think this is also the difference between research and selling products. One of the ways that Spotfire got successful was to be able to read every single tabular data format. Had to be able to read every single, had to be able to open access databases and Excel spreadsheets and comma-separated lists and every single other thing that you could think of. And you need to be able to, the total import time needed to be no more than file open, right? Anything beyond, if it was harder than that to get your data into their tool, then it wouldn't succeed. And as academics, we don't do any of that. So so that we've run into these problems with the biologists. So conceptually, they think it's useful, but they're not actually using the tool.
So one customer for Tree Plus, I would think, would be programmers who want to look at profile photographs. I mentioned before.
Right.
So, you want to understand the architecture of a system in terms of functions and in terms of modules. Mm-hmm. It might require a little bit more than what you currently have because there's you want some level of nesting other than what Tree supports. So you'd like to be able to partition a module into its functions or an object into its methods and so forth. Mm-hmm. And that's orthogonal to the Tree organization. And then there's the issue of weightings that Sanjay raised.
Right.
Where you don't just want to know everybody you called, you want to know how much time you spent in each of them. And so some of the children are more important than others. But still, I could imagine this being a really helpful and important part of an interactive development
Mm-hmm.
environment.
I hope so, eventually.
Any other question?
So you have shown several tools. And I have a quick question, which is which one of them do you think is the best way to represent a family tree?
Family tree? None of them. Family trees are weird beasts. Right?
So is there any free tools or software?
Yeah, because if you go, it turns out that there are a lot of people in the world that really care about genealogy, and they have built elaborate tools to support them. The Mormons are a big one because it's part of their religion, and they have recorded ancestry of everybody of Mormon faith ever, and
everybody that want to convert to the Mormon faith.
and everyone else. There happens to be some computer scientists among them. So I'm not really familiar with them, but I know that exists, and I haven't done it.
Have you seen their visualization tools?
Not recently.
It's a hypergraph case, is what I'm asking.
Yeah.
So maybe I should confirm.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Let's thank our speaker again.
Thank you very much.